The New York Giants might be last in the NFL when it comes to passing yards per game, but that doesn't mean that the job is going to be easy for the New Orleans Saints cornerbacks. We got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into today's episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Big shout out to all you everydayers out there. Don't forget you can subscribe and follow always for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going, take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, and much more, you can become a Locked On Saints insider today by simply texting Who Dat to 504-285-7473. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, Saints News Network, Tuesdays in the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. In today's episode of Locked On Saints, brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and enter the promo code in all lowercase Locked On NFL for a first deposit match up to $100. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at the New York Giants offense and how it has changed going from Daniel Jones, their original starting quarterback, to the newest UDFA rookie quarterback sensation of the season, Tommy DeVito. What will the New York Giants look to do? We're going to dive through their tendencies and some of the big dead giveaways that they have built into their offense already with Tommy DeVito leading the way. We're going to take a look at how to bottle up the New York Giants rushing attack, which will not be easy. But to kick us all off, I want to start off with the most important defenders for the New Orleans Saints going up against the New York Giants. And while many might think it's going to be an edge rusher, a pass rusher, a linebacker, things like that, this game may come down to Paulson Adebo, Yiadom and Alontae Taylor. And if you're a New Orleans Saints fan, you probably feel pretty good about that. The one shining thing that has been super consistent all throughout the season so far for the New Orleans Saints has been their secondary, in particular, their cornerbacks. Young safety Jordan Howden has stepped up big in Marcus May's place. Tyrann Mathieu continues to play well, of course, but it's going to be the cornerbacks that are going to be under a lot of pressure in this game. Let me explain to you why. The New York Giants target the middle of the field at the 30th lowest rank in the NFL. They do not target the middle of the field. In fact, they target it less right now with Tommy DeVito than they did with Daniel Jones. For Daniel Jones, 45% of his targets were in the middle of the field at any depth. Tommy DeVito, just 31%, so less than a third of his going to the middle of the field. He loves to target the perimeter. Dable loves to target the perimeter, all of those pieces. So what that means is that guys like Paulson Adebo and Yiadom on the outside are going to be under a lot of pressure and a little bit, because of that, under a microscope during this game. Big pass catchers. Of course, they're talking about getting Darren Waller back as well, the big tight end formerly of the Las Vegas Raiders, former teammate of Derek Carr's. So maybe that changes things a little bit, and they're a little bit more likely to attack the middle of the field with a big pass-catching tight end in the mix. But wide receivers like the small but definitely mighty Wan'Dale Robinson, number 17, as well as, of course, the big guy out of Tennessee, Jalen Hyatt, these guys are going to be targeted down the sidelines, whether that means streaking down the sidelines or whether that means crossing the middle of the field and getting to those sidelines. That's where you're going to see a lot of passing action by this New York Giants offense. And a lot of it is going to be built off of the run game early, play action later. 52% of the time they're running play action on those passing plays. So definitely a big thing to keep an eye out on. The good news for the New Orleans Saints is that Paulson Adebo has been electrifying all season. He is at the top, or near the top, within the top 10 in the NFL when it comes to PFF pass coverage grades, but you can also look at the pass coverage metrics and how he ends up standing up there. him going up against a big physical guy like a Jalen Hyatt, being a big physical guy himself with a lot of speed, former wide receiver traits, knows how to, track the ball, knows how to read where defenders are going or where wide receivers are going in and out of breaks, things like that. That's a pretty solid matchup for you. Isaac Yiadom also in the top 10 right now, or near the top 10, maybe just outside the top 10. Let's say in the top 15 when it comes to that same pass coverage grade by Pro Football Focus. You can put whatever, weight you want in PFF grades. You can see it in the raw metrics. You can see it on tape as well that these two guys have been very, very good for the New Orleans Saints over on the outside. So even without Marshawn Lattimore, who will be eligible to return after this game, by the way, the next game that he's eligible for is that Los Angeles Rams game. So that's where we could see him and Michael Thomas potentially coming off of injured reserve. This is big for the New Orleans Saints to have those two backup outside corners and then Alontae Taylor, who can move all around. Remember, the Saints tend to keep Alontae Taylor in the slot, even with an injured outside corner, when they're in a nickel set or have 5 defensive backs on the field and let's say 2 linebackers, for instance. But oftentimes they'll move him to the outside opposite Paulson Adebo when it's a base set and there's 3 linebackers on the field. So you'll see Alontae Taylor doing a little bit of both. So he becomes very important in this as well. He struggled early to really get sort of, let's call it a custom adjusted to the slot, but he's kind of evened out a bit, kind of plateaued, looking pretty good there, has been solid there. So even if the Giants do uncharacteristically from what we've seen over the course of the past 4 games with Tommy DeVito, even if they do start to attack the middle of the field, the Saints should probably still feel pretty good about that with Tyrann Mathieu and Jordan Howden helping to take that away in the deep areas. Alontae Taylor's coverage coming out of the slot. And then, of course, guys like Demario Davis, Pete Werner, and now Nephi Sewell, who's getting praise from head coach Dennis Allen here recently, being able to help the middle of the field. But that's going to be a big one. The next thing you're going to be watching for is just how much these guys want to go to their tight end. New York, not the heaviest tight end target share in the NFL. They don't target tight ends a ton, but a lot of that could be because they've had to be without a guy like Darren Waller so far this season. And so maybe with him being back in the lineup, we could see something like that beginning to change, and we'll see how effective he's able to be. The Saints have had some trouble with tight ends here as of late. Right now, New York targeting tight ends on 20% of their passing reps throughout this season. It's good for 18th in the NFL. In case you're wondering where the New Orleans Saints are on this same metric, by the way, exactly where you expect, 13%, third lowest in the NFL. We expect to see a lot more tight end usage for the New Orleans Saints. Haven't seen that a ton so far this year, but the New York Giants kind of in that same conversation, kind of in that same boat as well. So when you're looking at the passing game, corners are going to be under a lot of pressure. Perimeter is going to be under a lot of pressure, and pressure is the way to mitigate that, as well as, of course, solid coverage downfield. This is going to be a game where the complementary style defense of rush and coverage is going to be very, very important. Get in Tommy DeVito's face and hopefully don't let him start running all over the place in the process. Coming up next, speaking of that, we're going to take a look at the New York Giants run game. Again, corners going to be a big part of even that part of the game as well. We're going to break that down and how to put a cap on that New York Giants run defense up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Skylight Frame. I'm buying these for a bunch of people all throughout because this, especially family members, right? I usually have some trouble with gift giving during the holiday. These I love. They're touchscreen photo frames that you can send photos to directly from your phone, website app, all that other stuff. They've got advanced plans and things like that you can check out. You can preload the photos before the box is even open as well. Very, very cool stuff. They're so confident that you're going to love Skylight that they also offer free 120-day returns as well. And as a special limited time offer, Locked On listeners are going to be able to get $15 off of your purchase of a Skylight frame when you visit skylightframe.com/lockedon. To get $15 off of your purchase of Skylight Frame, go to skylightframe.com/lockedon. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/lockedon. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there who continue to make Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Every day means a ton. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On Sports Today, first ever national sports 24/7 YouTube stream. Be a part of history. Subscribe to Locked On Sports today. Now, as we take a look at this sort of breakdown of the New York Giants offense, we discussed the pressure that the corners are going to be under in the passing game because of the perimeter passing game of the New York Giants. Well, the run game is very similar. So the Saints are going to be tested on the ends in the run game, and that is going to be a big part of this game that's going to be vital for the New Orleans Saints defense. The perimeter run game for the New York Giants is where they love to go. They go to the end of their offensive line, so rushing to either side outside the tackles. 41% of the time, that's eighth most in the NFL. So what does that mean? That means that having very good perimeter run tacklers like Paulson Adebo, like Isaac Yiadom, who also is a big core special teamer, has to make those open field tackles, things like that. Jordan Howden's made he made a fantastic open field tackle last week. So the safety's coming down to crash those ends. And then, of course, your linebackers or your defensive line being able to get sideline to sideline is going to be big in this one as well. It's not to say that they don't like to run up the middle. It's not to say that the Giants won't run up the middle or to the center, to the guard, whatever. It's just that they heavily rely on running towards the outside. And when Tommy DeVito escapes, he likes to escape towards the outside as well. They also love to run with multiple running backs in the backfield. So if you see them come out in an I formation or an offset I, something to where they've got two running backs in the backfield, 21 personnel, which stands for two running backs, one tight end. First number is the number of running backs. Second number is the number of tight ends. 31 personnel, 12 personnel, things like that, where maybe they're a little bit heavier loaded. Expect the run game and expect it towards the outside in this game. They run 31% of the time, only 31% of the time when there's only one back in the backfield. So the juxtaposition there is very stark. So what you want to see from this New Orleans Saints team is an ability to be able to keep everything to the middle of the field. If you give up the sideline in the run game, you're going to have a bad time. I want you to think back. I'm sorry to do this to you, but I do want you to think back a few years ago. Quan Alexander was having a fantastic season with the New Orleans Saints. They were going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders kind of gets this power run up to the left side, and he kind of has a two-gap choice. He can choose to cut back inside to one side of the blocker on the inside of the blocker, or he can cut towards the outside on the outside of the blocker. Quan Alexander's on the opposite side of that, trying to crash down and defend. He has to make the same decision. He chooses to cut off the inside lane instead of the outside lane. Miles Sanders bounces outside, gets to the sideline, and houses it for like 70 plus yards. If you take away the outside lane instead, force him back inside, you force the running back into congestion, forcing him into the middle of the field, right? Where a lot of your defense is, where they could even run into their own players for all that you know, right? But you don't want to give up the sideline. So that's going to be big in this game. The Saints are going to want to redirect the run game to the middle of the field so that they can get multiple hats to the running backs or to whomever, whether it's, Barkley or otherwise. They want to get multiple hats there. And the easiest and best way to do that is to force the runner back to the middle of the field. Almost always, by NFL standards as well, they're going to throw the ball when they're in 3-by-1 formations, meaning that there's three pass catchers on one side, one pass catcher over on the other side. So that's a pretty good indicator of when you might be able to kind of like focus on the run a little bit, but still expect that pass. So there's just certain things that you can look at that show you the tendencies of when they rarely run versus when they really often run. The big thing that you're also going to have to pay attention to, though, is when do they look to break that tendency? 3-by-1 formation gives you a little bit, 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end. It's a single backfield. As we mentioned, all of those things stack up and say, this is probably not a run play for the New York Giants, but eventually they're going to have to start breaking that tendency. So is this the game that they do that against a New Orleans Saints run defense that has struggled so far this season, especially by its own standards? So that becomes the next kind of big wrinkle. But we can look at all the tendencies, we can look at the percentages, we can look at the numbers and things like that and say, well, when this happens, they do this. but eventually that's got to be broken. But does it get harder to break those tendencies when you have an undrafted free agent rookie quarterback leading the way? Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. So that's going to be a big thing that you're going to want to watch. But the biggest piece of this run game is going to be not giving up the sideline if you're the New Orleans Saints. If we compare the Saints sort of EPA per play allowed as a run defense versus the New York Giants EPA generated over on the offensive side as a rushing offense, the Saints have the clear advantage here. So this goes beyond just yardage, right? Yardage allowed per carry. It factors in situations, down and distance. What's a successful play versus an unsuccessful play? For instance, a 3-yard run on 3rd and 1 is a successful play, but a 3-yard run on 3rd and 7, not a successful play, right? It's the exact same play. You're picking up the exact same yardage, you're doing the exact same thing, but contextually, it's a failure. You're running for 3 yards on a 3rd and 7. What are you thinking? You're running for 3 yards on a 3rd and 1. What a good play call. There's context, right? So that's what EPA kind of helps to measure. How does each play help you score points, basically, or hurt you in scoring points? And that's what you want to do on the defensive side. You want to generate more negative EPA per play, less points allowed, than you want to allow EPA per play. Right now, the New York Giants run defense is second last in the NFL. I don't know what I'm trying to say, second from the bottom, maybe, when it comes to rush EPA. The New Orleans Saints, 12th best when it comes to rush EPA over on defense. They do a good job defending things within context, even if they're giving up a bunch of yards and stuff like that. And I think Dennis Allen kind of hinted to that the other day of like, look, you can rush for 204 rushing yards all you want, but if you only score 6 points, it's on us to find a way to win that game, is kind of the way that he was talking about it. And I think you can see some of that in what it is that the New Orleans Saints defense does do when it comes down to where they defend over on the defensive side when it comes to the run game. Contextually, they show up when they need to. And I think that that's what you're going to need to see from this New Orleans Saints defense yet again here against the New York Giants. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that it's not only Saquon Barkley that's going to be running. They've got other running backs, but they also have Tommy DeVito, a guy that, just like Daniel Jones, has that escapability, has that mobility, can be very annoying. DeVito, unsurprisingly, picks up the majority of his rushing yards against man coverage. The Saints are a heavy man coverage team, top 10 in the NFL when it comes to man coverage usage. Remember, when you're a heavy man coverage team and when you're a team that builds its identity on the defensive side by man coverage, it doesn't mean that you actually run man coverage more than you run zone coverage. It just means that you run man coverage relative to or a lot relative to the rest of the league. The Saints are about just under a third of the time they're in man coverage. So about 31%. Number one in the NFL is 40%, right? You see the difference there? And so they're up there in terms of heaviest man coverage usage in the NFL. So that will be something to watch as well. When Tommy DeVito does break contain, when he ends up scrambling, are the backs of the defenders downfield in coverage to the quarterback, because that's often what allows quarterbacks a lot of opportunity to run, scramble, and pick up big yards against man coverage, because everybody's not focused back on the quarterback in coverage like you are in zone. You're turned downfield, tracking your receiver, tracking your coverage responsibility. So just something to keep an eye out on there as well. Coming up next, the New York Giants tendencies show that they have dead giveaways built into their offense. Let me introduce you to a few as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's super simple. You pick a game like the Saints and the Giants. You choose 2 to 6 players. They're going to give you a bunch of projections for those players. You choose whether or not they're going to come out at more or less than those projections. So Derek Carr, let's say it's 206.5 passing yards, for instance. You think he's going to have more than that in this game or less than that in this game? You choose those, you get them right. You can win up to 25 times your entry with Prize Picks. And now you can do a lot of fun things as well. You can use their specials leagues, which give you an opportunity to be able to blend sports. 10.5 LeBron James 3-pointers and Travis Kelce catches more or less, and then it puts those two together. A lot of opportunity to have a lot of fun with all of this. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL today and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. It's a first deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. Today's episode of Locked On Saints also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, who very much believe in the New Orleans Saints at home here against the New York Giants. You know how you're given effectively 3 points for being at home? Well, the New Orleans Saints minus 6 point favorites, nearly a touchdown favorite against the New York Giants. I think that's a little drastic on my side of it. I would probably take the Giants to beat the spread in this one. So if you want to take that, or you like the New Orleans Saints as a big time money line favorite, there's a fantastic deal for you right now over at FanDuel if you're a new customer. Because right now, new customers will get $150 in bonus bets by winning one $5 money line bet. That's $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. So you can pick the Saints, who are heavily favored in this one, for $5. If they lose, no big deal. It was $5. If they win, 30-1 odds immediately coming your way in bonus bets that you can then use for spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a final look, or not a final look, but a closing look for today's episode in the New York Giants offense, which has some dead giveaways in their tendencies. So let's be smarter as we're watching the game this weekend and watching out for these tendencies. Appreciate all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. I'm going to give you some giveaways and I'm going to give you some tendencies for them. I want to start off with the giveaways though. Listen, if Wan'Dale Robinson, the tiny but mighty a wide receiver, number 17, is lined up in the slot, it's a pass. It's a pass play, more than likely. More than 70% of the time, it is a passing play when Wan'Dale Robinson lines up in the slot. And listen, Tommy DeVito loves him some Wan'Dale Robinson. I think you got an opportunity to see that last week, or really earlier this week on Monday, as the Giants toppled the Green Bay Packers. Wan'Dale Robinson was a key part of that. Had 7 targets, 6 catches for 79 yards, including a big time 32-yard catch. He was a big part of the safety blanket for Tommy DeVito as well, targeting him downfield, went to him consistently when they were trying to close that gap and get in there to get in range to be able to take this game, to be able to win this game and all that. He really, really likes him some Wan'Dale Robinson. I meant to also mention Tommy DeVito's rushing stats in the last game as well. By the way, earlier, 10 rushes for 71 yards against the Green Bay Packers. So not only did he run for a lot of yards, but he ran often. So just something to watch there. So watch out for Wan'Dale Robinson, number 17, small receiver, but goes out there and is able to get a lot done and definitely plays a lot bigger than he is. Don't let that size fool you. Let's take a look at the next tendency here. Number 84, tight end Tyree Jackson. If he is in the game 67% of the time, it's a run. Welcome to, and let me introduce you to, the New York Giants blocking tight end. That's the guy that you're watching for anytime that he's on the field. Think about when, the Saints had guys like Adam Troutman and, a little bit of Josh Hill in there too, although Josh Hill maybe had a little bit more of that versatility than he gets credit for. But there were certain guys, and we saw it earlier on in the season. Keith Kirkwood was a dead giveaway for the Saints run game. Lynn Bowden for a little while, dead giveaway for the Saints run game. All of those things, had to adjust those. Are the Giants able to start adjusting those here soon? And how does Darren Waller impact this as well? Because Darren Waller ain't blocking nobody, right? Like, he's not the biggest dude and all that. So does Tyree Jackson's blocking role become even more prominent now that the big pass catcher at the position is back? So watch out for number 84. Watch out for the run game, and watch out for those runs to go over towards the outside. And hey, speaking of guys like Keith Kirkwood and Lynn Bowden being put in those positions where they were kind of these dead giveaways for the run game, not by their choice, but by design. This is a scheme question. The New York Giants have a blocking wide receiver as well, even though he should be a lot more than what he is. Isaiah Hodgins, particularly over the course of the past 4 games since Tommy DeVito has been in at quarterback, he has been a pretty solid indicator of the run as well. Not 63% of the time, but he's been a pretty solid indicator. So maybe what you're watching for is Wan'Dale Robinson out of the game? Is Isaiah Hodgins in the game? And then is number 84, tight end Tyree Jackson, in the game? That seems to be a pretty good. And are there 2 running backs in the backfield? Those all tend to be pretty good indicators that this is about to be a run by the New York Giants. And watch for them to attack, of course, that the perimeter in the run game. The other thing that's really interesting to me over the course of the past 4 games is that they love having Tommy DeVito throw on third and anything. Third and just about anything. 3rd and 1, it's 50-50 in terms of the breakdown over the course of the past 4 weeks of run and pass. But 3rd and 2 or 3, 3rd and 4 or 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 10 or longer, they want to throw with Tommy DeVito. Now, of course, obviously throwing with Tommy DeVito on 3rd and long makes perfect sense. But even on 3rd and 2, there's a heavy portion of those attacks that come through the air. So this is another big deal for those corners, like we mentioned earlier on in the show. Not just the perimeter passing game, not just the edge rush game, but also being able to get off the field on 3rd and shorts, since the Giants seemingly don't seem to turn to Saquon Barkley as much as you would imagine them to do so here recently when it comes to those 3rd and shorts. Think Bijan Robinson and the Atlanta Falcons until very recently. And they like to throw the ball. Anytime that you put the ball in the air, especially a quarterback that has as low a passer rating as Tommy DeVito at the line of scrimmage, whenever you throw the ball, it's a lower percentage chance that you're converting that 3rd down. So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 kind of really intricate numbers that kind of give you a glimpse behind this, right? So on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, if the New York Giants want to throw the ball with Tommy DeVito, right? Let's look at how often, or in relation to the first down marker, you see the New York Giants in terms of their targets downfield, right? So one of the things that we always talk about is like, oh, they should be throwing at the sticks, right? So you should be throwing at the sticks, just shy of the sticks. The Saints right now actually top 5 in the NFL of attacking the sticks. The New York Giants, second from last, again, second lowest. On average, 2.3 yards in the passing game behind the sticks. So if you're at 2nd and 3, if you're throwing a ton with Tommy DeVito, if you know you have a perimeter attack that you're probably going for, and you're consistently on average throwing 2 yards shy of the sticks, you're oftentimes throwing to your line of scrimmage by that line of thinking. And in those cases, Tommy DeVito has been very, very, very poor when it comes to his performance at targeting at the line of scrimmage. It's odd, but his passer rating sinks when he gets closer to the line of scrimmage. So with that being the case, that can work in the New Orleans Saints' favor of getting off the field on 3rd downs. 2 other things, or rather 3 other things, to just give you a little bit of these are things that we've criticized missing in the New Orleans Saints offense. And so I'm going to give you an idea of what it looks like in the New York Giants offense. The Giants love up tempo. 16.6% no huddle rate. That's the 2nd highest in the NFL. That's just how often they go into a no huddle up tempo offense. They use a lot of play action. 52% of their passes come out of play action, and they use a lot of motion about 47% of the time. Now, remember, we're looking at the last 4 games with Tommy DeVito specifically when it comes to those metrics. Things were different with Daniel Jones. Things are different post Daniel Jones. So you see a lot of motion, you see a lot of play action, and you see a lot of up tempo. So those are going to be other things to watch. Those aren't giveaways, but those are certainly tendencies to keep an eye out on when it comes to this New York Giants offense in terms of things that can get complicated for the New Orleans Saints defense. Coming up tomorrow, the one, the only, Patricia Traina herself will be here on the show. I love Patricia, and I can't wait to speak with her. Locked on Giants, Locked on Saints, our crossover Thursday, breaking it all down. And then we're going to dive a little bit more into what the Saints need to do with our Jackson 5 and the game plan on Friday, looking over at the New York Giants defensive side with a greater focus there as well. But wanted to give you kind of this in-depth look at the Giants offense early, since things are very different than where they were early on in the season with the quarterback change in the Big Apple. Appreciate you as always, y'all, for making Locked on Saints your first listen of the day every day. And I thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day and a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, about how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.